Hello readers and welcome to Tell Between Tales. I just finished reading Wind and Truth, Stormlight Archive Book 5 by Brandon Sanderson, and this book was incredibly polarizing for me. I finished it about a week ago, and I'm really glad that I waited to make this video because there are definitely a lot of things that I needed to sit with and that I needed to process with this book. And the reason why this book was really polarizing, on one hand, I absolutely loved this book, and on the other hand, I absolutely hated this book. And it's super sad, and we're going to discuss that today. And I'm going to be splitting this review, my Stormlight Archive Book 5 Wind and Truth review, into two videos. And today is going to be the reasons why I hate this book, because it was so incredibly polarizing for me that I decided I needed to have two dedicated videos. One was everything I hated, and one was everything that I absolutely loved about this book. This is going to be the everything I hated portion of this review because it has been stewing around in my head and I just need to get my thoughts out and maybe rant about it a little bit, because I do feel very betrayed and I feel very hurt and very sad about the direction that Sanderson is going in. And so let's discuss what is going on with this book. The Stormlight Archive is a series that I absolutely love, and Wind and Truth continues this story. I love the story, I love the Cosmere, and I love the characters and the world that he's built on Roshar and the magic system. However, in this book, I got a huge shock when I discovered that Sanderson had inserted a whole bunch of LGBTQ popular ideology into his book as a statement to the readers. Time and time again, as I read through this book, I encountered several different popular ideologies. There is an LGBTQ love story. There's also ideologies on transgender and on asexual characters. And you get this again and again, and it's strewn all throughout the book. And so it just keeps coming back up. And the way that it's written is very weird. It feels very off-putting, and it really pulls you out of the story. We're going to discuss some specifics here in just a minute. Now, I want to make it very clear before we begin that, number one, I don't mind when stories have gay characters in them as long as they are properly written for the story. They were there from the start. They make sense, and it doesn't make the story feel preachy, weird, or awkward. Some of the stories that I've read that have LGBT characters in them that I really enjoyed the story are Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, as well as Six of Crows from the Grishaverse, and Discovery of Witches, The Starless Sea, and Divine Rivals. And number two, I personally do not like reading LGBTQ love stories. It is not my preference. I don't like reading these books just in the same way that I don't like reading books that have a whole lot of swearing in them. See my video about The Stand when I DNF'd it because there was way too much swearing for me. Another preference I have is that I really don't like reading books that have a lot of explicit sexual content in them, which is why I've steered clear of Game of Thrones, as well as the very popular A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. These are books that I have chosen not to pick up for that specific reason. As this is a preference of mine, and this is a free country, I feel like I get to pick what books I do and do not read, and I choose not to read LGBTQ love stories. I don't enjoy them, along with all the other things I previously mentioned. So with that in mind, why did the LGBTQ stuff in Wind and Truth hit me so much harder than it did in some of the other stories that I mentioned that I actually really enjoyed? First, we need to explore where Sanderson has come from. It is no secret that Sanderson is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as LDS or the Mormon Church. And I am a member of this same church. And upon me entering adulthood and starting to pick up more adult fantasy, it was increasingly difficult to find books that did not have strong swearing and strong sexual content. Enter Sanderson. He has made his career based off of books that adhere to traditional values. His books don't have a lot of swearing in them, even if he makes up some swear words. The real swear words that he uses traditionally are pretty minimal, And he doesn't have explicit sexual content. It's a lot of fade to black. And he holds true to all of those traditional conservative values that he was raised with. This quickly elevated him to my absolute favorite author of all time. I had been working through everything that he had written, and he was known as a safe place to go for excellent stories, wonderful world building, fun magic systems, and a place that people who don't want those things in their novels can go, and you can pick up a Sanderson novel and not have to deal with all of the, let's say, adult content that is permeating a lot of the literature today. So I have been very excited for Wind and Truth, along with a lot of other people. And when I picked up this book, I was very shocked and incredibly disappointed to see that he made two of our kind of main characters. They're not like, Kaladin and Shallan and Dalinar, like the big ones, but he made R'lyeh and Renarin gay. And this I was completely shocked, very disappointed about, and it really does a big disservice to his characters and the themes that he was developing. I highly doubt that when he embarked on this journey and he wrote Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, that was his plan from the beginning. This is a disservice to his characters, his fans, and his story. Now, Sanderson, in responding to criticism, has admitted that he was worried about how his fans would take this, and that his career might crash and burn over this book. The problem with Wind and Truth is that he fundamentally changed the culture of his world and the characters of the book to include this ideology. This was not the place for it, and he had sensitivity readers who read his book and basically told him to insert this LGBTQ ideology into his story, which is why it seems so jarring and out of place and incredibly preachy. I feel so betrayed as an LDS fan. However, Sanderson has all but explicitly stated that he's willing to lose his LDS fan base and his conservative fan base over this book. He has stated that he knew fans were going to be upset over this, but he was going to do it anyway, in favor of the critical acclaim of the publishing industry and the entertainment industry. He doesn't care about us, his conservative and LDS fans. He would rather have the acceptance of his new community. He stated, "My current stance is one of unequivocal support for LGBTQ rights. I support gay marriage, I support trans rights, the rights of non-binary people, and I support the rights of trans people to affirm their own identity with love and support. I support anti-discrimination legislation and have voted consistently along these lines for the last 15 years. I am making the posting of this FAQ item at the encouragement of several of my LGBTQ fans, with a sizable donation to the Utah Pride Center and another to the Out Foundation." He's also stated, "I put LGBTQ people into my books and will continue to do so, not because I want to fulfill a quota, but because I genuinely believe that it is right for the characters and is a good and important thing for me to be doing." He has come out and said that he is going to be promoting this agenda in his upcoming books and be putting them in his upcoming books in larger and larger quantities. This is not what I want in my reading. This is not why I pick up fantasy books and read fantasy. This is a complete betrayal of his faith and a large percentage of his fans. For Stormlight 5, there is little to no indication that Renarin and R'lyeh are gay. And contrary to what he said about how this is right for the characters, I think that this plotline does these two characters a huge disservice, and we're going to discuss that now. R'lyeh was the one who was bridging the gap between the singers and the humans, the proof that these two groups who have been fighting for millennia can coexist and make peace, that both species can learn and grow to understand one another. This theme is undercut by the homosexual ideology portrayed in his relationship with Renarin. Now the narrative is, R'lyeh is also a social outcast from his people. He was teased and expendable, so he went to the humans because the other singers didn't want him there. And now the only way humans and singers can make peace is if they love each other. This does the message a huge disservice, as Sanderson turns it into a message of how we need to be accepting of gay rights instead of two species setting aside their differences and learning to understand one another to stop an endless cycle of war and death. Also, this topic, having never been mentioned before, has not been explored across all of the different countries and cultures in Roshar. How is everybody just being okay and accepting this any better than everybody not accepting this? It does the narrative a disservice, which is telling the reader to go ahead, accept this, move on, this is what we're doing, instead of inviting the narrator into a discussion to actually think about these issues and participating in the debate and the discussion of morality, acceptance, prejudice, and persecution, which would be much more realistic and much more valuable and a much more useful representation, rather than Shallan just jumping for joy because Renarin and R'hllane finally hooked up. Likewise, as with R'hllane's character, Renarin's character is also undercut by this. Renarin is the second son of one of the most powerful people in the world. His story is one of not living up to expectations. He is seen as a social outcast, the weakling, the weird one, the quiet one, the outlier on the fringes of society. His story is about overcoming these social deficits and finding his place in the world and discovering his strengths and coming into his own. Making him gay does two atrocities. One, it plays into society's stereotypes that LGBTQ people are the weird ones, the social outcasts of society, and then tells us that we are the problem and it's our fault that they feel socially outcast. And two, it takes away Renarin's struggle and accomplishments as a character by justifying it with, oh, I was gay all along and that is why I had these problems, and now that I have come out and accepted my gayness, I'm a stronger person and am no longer afraid of society. His shortcomings in earlier books are no longer about him as a person, it's about him being gay and too afraid to admit that in society. This also makes no sense in the world that is created, that everyone would just be okay with this. As the second son to the king, he is needed in this world to be married off to an advantageous marriage for political alliances and to have heirs to the kingdom, as we have seen with Shallan and Adolin, and Gavilar trying to marry Yasna to Amaram. I don't think that everyone would just be okay with this in the world and society that Sanderson has created, and I don't think this was the story he was planning on telling when he wrote the first few Stormlight books. Sanderson has said, it is a bigger statement not to include queer characters than to include them, which really makes no sense. It's a much bigger statement to change the characters of a work you've already written to align with your new agenda than to write a new character or new stories that organically have these characters in them, and you can do it in a way that doesn't cram this down our throat. Besides Renarin and R'hllane, there are several other scenes where you get inserts of this ideology that just yank the reader out of the immersive experience, such as the scene with Adolin recruiting people from Azir to join in the defense of the city. You can see in this excerpt from the story, Adolin says, Adolin stopped by one taller woman with good muscles on her, the strongest he'd seen so far. She stood with her eyes straight forward at attention. This is someone who is very obviously a woman. Name, soldier? He asked her. Sarquin, sir, she said. Where'd you gain those muscles, Sarquin? He asked. Storms, he could not get that to sound right. Blacksmithing, sir. I've apprenticed for 7 years and just been named master. Impressive, he said. Like I've told the other women, if I let you in, you'll have to live and work around men in what might be embarrassing situations. I'm used to it, sir, she said. I have papers. Papers? He hesitated, then glanced at his scribe. One who has filled out the forms, Chala, the scribe whispered, to live as a man. Ah, he'd heard of that. Well, the Asirs did things their own way, didn't they? Good to have you, Sarquin, Adolin said to the man and moved on, though he did make a note for Colette to assign him to a specific platoon, where Adolin knew for a fact they'd been asking for a soldier with smithing experience. So within this story, this little excerpt just feels very jarring and it really rips you out of the story. And you can see at the beginning, this is obviously a woman using her pronouns. And then as soon as she says, oh, actually, I have papers that say I'm a man, it's now him, him, him. So the ideology is you just accept this and you go with the flow, and this is the way it is, and we're not going to talk about it, and this is normal, and this is good, and this is right, and that's the way it's done. And I don't appreciate this being thrown in my face in this type of a way in my fantasy stories. It doesn't belong in there. It's very weird, and I don't like it. This is very much Sanderson saying, see, I'm keeping up with the popular trends. I'm in with it. Look at me. I'm cool too. I am so disappointed that my favorite author and my greatest literary hero has fallen so far. He used to be someone who stood up for what he believed in, stood up for those traditional values. And sadly, now that he has come out and said that he is going to put this woke ideology into all of his future books, I will sadly be quitting the Cosmere, and I will not be purchasing or reading any new Sanderson books that he puts out after Stormlight 5. This is the part where I'm really glad that I took a little while to process my feelings and my thoughts, because I still think that everything he's written up to this point is still really good. He has a little bit of LGBTQ stuff like at the end of Mistborn Era 2, but it's not in your face, it's not preachy, and it's not super weird. So it didn't really get to me. It didn't really bother me. He didn't fundamentally change anything about his characters in a way that ruined the story or threw it in your face. I also have heard that The Year of Sanderson has just a tiny bit of it in there, but other than that, these stories seem like they're still going to be great. And because I do own them, I am planning on reading them. This is the book that has really, this book, Wind and Truth, I say this is the book. This is the book that has really made a splash. This is Sanderson's coming out story. This is Sanderson's experience of coming out of the closet. This is him coming out and telling the world, hey, guess what? I am now promoting woke ideology. This book is him coming out of the closet, and it was the wrong book, the wrong place, and the wrong way to do it. But the reason why he did it in this book is because this book is probably the most anticipated fantasy book that has been released in a long time. People have been looking forward and anticipating this release for years. Stormlight is one of his most popular series that he has out today. This book is guaranteed an audience. It was guaranteed to be talked about, to be popular. Everybody was going to be talking about this book. And so this is where he did it, to make as big of a splash as possible. He has a lot of fans that are going to pick this up regardless, because they want to finish the first arc of the Stormlight Archive and see how that concludes. And so as long as he is putting these ideologies in his book for the purpose of preaching to the masses, then I will not be picking up his books anymore, because I don't want it in my reading. I specifically read his books because they did not have this stuff in his books. So I think it is terribly unfortunate that he has ruined what could potentially have been a fantasy series that would have joined the ranks of greatest timeless series of all time, such as Lord of the Rings and The Wheel of Time, because he has put dated popular ideology into his book. It's no longer timeless. It's no longer going to resonate with people throughout the ages. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop reading his books and buying his products. Will this make any difference to him? If I'm the only one, absolutely not. He doesn't care about me. He's already said that he doesn't want me as a fan, and he doesn't care about me as a fan. And so hopefully, if enough of us can talk about this and band together, it will make a statement, and maybe he can get back to his true self and his core values and start writing books the way that we actually like them. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with me, because there's a lot of people, which is the crowd that he is trying to appeal to, that do enjoy having this in their books. But there are still a lot of people that don't want it. Not everybody has to enjoy reading books with these ideologies in them. Join the conversation in the comments section. I know it's a hot topic, so please try to keep your comments respectful. Thank you very much. I am going to hopefully be posting part 2 of this review, which is everything that I loved about the Stormlight Archive, and that will hopefully be coming up next week. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.